G'day everyone, this is Rangadad. Not financial advice, just the way I'm looking at the market. Sorry I missed yesterday. Wife was in hospital getting a back fix, so actually because I had to pick her up from hospital, it was already fixed. So yeah, downside continues. I'm kind of liking the fact that this is such a quick move to the downside at the moment and just consistent. I think it's going to give us a rip when it does rip. There's a couple of things we got to look at today. Some of the markets were closed in the US today anyway. But yeah, there's a couple of signs that we might be starting to have a little bit of a turnaround. Skew's still not really showing us much. That was from Wednesday, obviously. But show you there. So it's neither here nor there. The advanced decline line. This the advanced decline line's kind of got a bit of a trend line happening on it. I think we can hold that level. I think we should actually be good if we can. And typically, when it does sort of start to increase like this, it does keep going. Most of these ones you can see, once the downtrend has stopped, it does tend to actually reverse and then return to the upside. I haven't really found much that goes in the opposite direction. So that's kind of a good sign that we are starting to find a base. And given people are I'm starting to hear a lot more about, 75K Bitcoin and all that kind of thing. The market likes people doing that because it'll just rip on them. And there are a lot of shorts coming into the market at the moment. So SPY is interesting in that there is a red vector candle above here. Now, it hasn't really hit any levels that I'm super happy with there. But just going off that red vector candle recovery and a little bit of a positive day on Wednesday, it wouldn't surprise me if this did bounce a little. Global liquidity is kind of starting to tick up a little bit. Got a bit of downside on it, but when you actually look at where is it? You actually look at the chart, it's starting to sort of go a bit more sideways. We did something similar back here, but now we're doing it with momentum kind of in our favor as well. So that's something to keep in mind. What we kind of need to see is this Chinese 10-year turning around. This drop has really just dragged global liquidity down. So, yeah, I'll just have a quick look at the equal weights. Equal weights are still looking okay on the Qs and the S&P. They seem to be finding some support. Hopefully it's an accumulation. We won't really know until we actually see a decent move out of this region. But basically, that is kind of your region. You want to see a break either side of this. And to be honest with you, I'm going to keep that there because, and it's potentially even a little bit further down, just because we've got these two peaks here. but we're a fairly major reversal point on the way up. So I still think there's potential to come into that, but at this stage, there's no clear direction either way. And as those of you who watch regularly know, this was our indicator that there was something a bit off in the market. This was pulling back as the S&P 500 is still going up. Yeah, it's not a lot to talk about on here really. Yeah, not much at all. Of course, the markets were closed as well. So interesting that IWM's got a vector candle up here, but most of them have this big vector here that should attract price. Now, it's just a matter of when, I think. We are, what, 10 days off inauguration now. I don't know if I said it on the video the other day, but I mentioned it in Discord. But I think we could still pull back a little bit, possibly just a sweep of the lows to gather up whatever stop losses are in below these areas, and then just sort of start grinding up probably a few days before the inauguration from those lows. Just it'll be climbing the wall of worry, but I think in general, the big guys have started to buy back in reasonable numbers. XLY, XLP is still high. That's good. And, the equal weight XLY, XLP is still making new highs as well. So, again, that's kind of suggesting that we're not breaking down fully yet. Now, there is still some issues. This big rollover on consumer staples isn't great for the overall economy. Read. And the consumer discretionary is starting to roll over as well. So they're both not great reads, but we are coming to a point where we're just at this high here, and that would be a pretty reasonable level for a bounce too. Just going to put a quick trend line on here. We could still come back into this trend line and still the market may find some support and some real buying over the next few months. Not guaranteed, but that will be an interesting level. Plenty of support here for KRE. I think we want BBWP to actually start to increase here reasonably significantly as the price is moving up. There is going to be some resistance overhead. So we could sort of trudge sideways and down a little bit here before moving up. And if it gets to the point where we sort of do that and we're coming up in here, recovering these vector candles, then we could actually see more downside. And that's not going to look great for the economy as a whole. I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to upside runs this year and well, probably for the next 2 or 3 years, because I'm actually thinking we may not break overhead trend lines very easily. This is pretty similar. Home construction, getting a bit of a bid the other day. Momentum's ticking to the upside. I think this has found pretty well its bottom. very close to it. So watch them closely. If they break above these levels, then I think in general they will find a decent bounce, probably quite significant bounces. What's that from a potentially 10% bounce? Again, I don't think this is going to be a recovery from here to, you know, retest big trend lines, but stranger things have happened, I guess. Just gonna put that trend line in there because I think that may become important. Semis, kind of a flat day, but reasonable amount of buying off this level. It was quite a lot of resistance at this level, so it does make sense to be a support level here on semis, but they need to break through this candle here to really go hard. There is a big gap there. Yeah, they may have a bit more to go yet. Get back to Bitcoin in a second. I'm just, because I missed the review the other day, it gives me a chance to catch up the fact that markets were closed. Most markets were closed. Worthwhile sort of zooming out on some of these too. Like the transport sector's been pretty shit for a while. Shit, I didn't notice that vector in there, or that big spike. That's interesting. We tend to always get pretty close to reclaiming the top of a wick like that, and then it will reverse back. So kind of played out that way this time too. You want to see this thing run a bit harder, given momentum is going pretty good at the moment. If we get that BBWP increase, that could lead to a pretty decent jump. Technically, this is still in a bullish trend on the longer time frames, but it's certainly something we need to be looking out for the tops in the market. Same with DJI. Still technically a bullish trend. I'm hearing a lot more commentators and experienced traders sort of talking about, we may have reached the peak and, we may be going into a big recession and stuff like that. And I think I'd rather see them turn bullish again, like as we're getting to new highs again, and then I'll be actually looking for a more major correction. Yeah, VIX is kind of spiking a little bit, and if we get up to that sort of 23 or so, has been a bit of a ceiling on the VIX. If we have a couple of days where it does spike, then that should find a bottom on the markets, unless there's something much more sinister going on. Interestingly, this is VIX on one-day options. What I did notice, I had a bit of a look at this yesterday, and whenever this bottoms out, we tend to find a peak in the market. And it's been pretty good for that. Like a reversal from major lows tends to find the peak, whether it's a local peak or not. Generally, they've been fairly major ones. Like that's not a small correction by any means. But as you can see here, little double bottom, that's your peak there before a fairly big retrace. and it tends to spike very close to the bottom as well. So we did actually get quite a big spike, like to the level that we haven't seen much of. And this is fairly new, like zero DTE options haven't actually been around that long. But yeah, this was an interesting signal. And the fact that we've sort of haven't really made any major new lows on that, and we are spiking again above this. This is kind of divergence really on this indicator. And to me, this could actually reverse relatively soon. And if you see that, it's probably going to lead to more upside and confirm that we've got a local bottom here. So just shows you like the VIX has been an interesting indicator and it's got some interesting levels on it. But this day and age, the zero DTE options are really powerful in this market. They've just recently, they actually were over 50% of the volume, options volume on the US stock market. And so you really got to start paying attention to this version of the VIX, actually. I've had it on my charts for a while. I've just never paid too much attention to it because I never looked at it in this way. When you look at it as a candlestick graph, it looks freaking ridiculous. Like I just looked at that and went, no, thanks. But I just so happened to switch to it after having the line graph on. I went, there's actually something there. Okay. German market doesn't look great, but no significant read there. Chinese market, it's actually nasty that we're getting such a big increase in BBWP as it's coming down. Again, still the bottom of this box seems to be a potential target for this. At least that 200 EMA. And again, like a lot of these markets and stuff, they've stopped at the moment just above sort of key levels. And so that's why I'm leaning towards maybe a couple extra days down and then we bounce. Doesn't have to happen that way. The market's great at being irrational. UK market's been getting some serious interest lately. Don't know that it will actually break out, but it's not really something I'm looking to trade anyway. It's just interesting. TLT, another down day. Decent buying though on Wednesday, and we are making higher lows on the stochastic momentum as well as we're coming down. So I still think it'll potentially get down into the 85, 84 and a half sort of region. And then I will actually be moving some more into that ETF. Yeah, bonds still kind of heading up, I guess. This certainly is an uptrend at the moment. Hopefully it's not a bear flag, which it kind of looks like. It's a very aggressive bear flag, but yeah, whether we can close that gap or not, we'll see. But the bonds are certainly, like the high yield corporate is suggesting kind of the opposite of the rest of the bond market. And again, LQDIF, that still like to see that come down a little bit more before bouncing. So it doesn't have to, but at this stage, there's no clear sign that it's going to reverse yet either. US 2-year is pretty flat. We are starting to form a bit of a wedge pattern in here. Be interesting to see which way that breaks. I suspect it's going to break down, but you know, have to wait and see. Yields have really found a lot of resistance at this level. At this stage, there's a bit of bearish divergence on the momentum as well. I do suspect that there will be a pullback, potentially back into this trend line. That will actually allow the market to go up. At this stage, the market is reacting quite quickly to any changes in the yield. So that's the bit of hope in there that we don't actually break through that 4.7 level. A lot of people are calling for this to go to 5%. I don't know that we'll get there. This level looks pretty strong at this stage. And just given where markets are, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. Copper. Copper's actually showing strength here. It might have a bit more to run too. Pretty decent break. It would have been great to close above this wick here at 4.33. We haven't, but we'll see how we go. On the next day, it is a pretty decent run with no real confirmation of this breakout. So copper could actually come back as well. But yeah, at this stage, definitely a downtrend. Oh, hang on. It's worthwhile putting this. I'd probably put it there, to be honest. So we could have another day up and then a pullback just based on that trend line there. At this stage, until we actually break above that trend line and confirm it, then copper is still wedging. Gold still wedging as well. Looking reasonably strong though. If it does break this, it could run pretty quickly, and you're getting into targets that are pretty decent, depending on where you measure these things from. But if we took it, that would potentially get you up to 2,900, a break to the upside. It's leaving a few wicks and stuff behind, but see how it goes. Silver. Silver's tapering off a little bit. It's not a great sign when we've only just seen BBWP starting to tick up a little bit. You want momentum to continue to the upside and get into that bullish control zone for silver to really go on a decent run. But I think it would make sense if silver kind of did that at least into that 31, 32 level. I don't think there's much stopping it before that. And then we'll have to wait and see. Just going to put a horizontal trend line in there because that's a fairly strong level too. Okay. So in general, there's a few of these things are showing the markets a little bit bullish, potentially. Oil struggling to get through this level, but it looks like it wants to. That's for sure. Just do another trend line on this. So that's going to be next resistance for oil, I think, somewhere up into this level, probably around 77. That'll be a fairly strong resistance level, I'd say. Not great for inflation, but at this stage, I don't know that inflation's really driving stuff anymore. Dixie, not a great turnaround to the upside here. It's still think it needs to go to 110, but which means yields may break out to the upside of that. Like what we could get here is a little fake out to the upside of this wedge, or on the 10-year, little fake out to the upside of this resistance level, and then a pullback. That would kind of potentially see Dixie hit that 110 and pull back. Just the 110 just seems like a proper target for it. It probably, like looking at it again, there's potentially a resistance in there as well, but which I think we may have, yeah, we've already tapped that one. So I may double top here. We'll just have to wait and see, but I don't think this has got too much more in it before we see a decent pullback. Japanese yen looks like it's starting to bottom as well. Euro still doesn't look great. It's probably still shit, to be honest, but yeah, I mean, it could turn around here. There is a fair level there. Just we'll have to wait and see. Need euro to break this trend line anyway, reasonably soon, I think, for the stock market to find its bottom. Mag 7 still holding. Stocks above 50-day moving average. Took a little bounce the other day as well. So again, little basing pattern here is good. See how we go. Not a hell of a lot of read on most of these. Nvidia had a little bounce, but pulled back again. I think this is just going to be a choppy until the market picks a direction, which the direction should be up eventually. And if we're just chopping sideways, then that could be fairly bullish for the next 6 months or so. At which point we may get that blow off top and the whole thing just crashes hard. But I have to wait and see. Triple M, if you want to trade, is probably, if it breaks this level, it will probably come back up to the 140. Amazon, Meta, yeah, they're all kind of just dicking around. AMD's pulled back a little, quite a lot. Fairly substantial drop there. What's yeah, right. Probably the wording around concerns about PC demand, more than the fact that they're focusing on AI. They may have been a bit disappointing compared to Nvidia as well. So I'll just add what? How did I spell that wrong? Fuck. Okay, I'll add that later maybe. Oh, I mean crypto. What a dumber. Have a quick look at Broadcom. Oh, that's Jesus. What you don't want to see is this gapping down. That would be nasty. That's a massive gap up though. Broadcom hasn't done that much in its history. Gap that big. Decent gap up there, which led to continuation. Yeah, a lot of the time the gap ups, big gap ups, are sort of when they start to go sideways, they do pull back a bit. So that's not ideal. Bit of a suck and see here, but that doesn't look great. They had good earnings. That's what drove that. Um, Dividends have already been paid, so yeah. Uh, anyway, ASML semis are still looking okay, but I'd like to see them really run. AI is probably the play still. Aussie market has gone a little higher than I kind of expected it might, but that's not a bad thing. If the Aussie market continues an uptrend, which it looks like it should, like BBWP is increasing, um, that that actually could suggest that the economy globally is in a better place than what you might think. Now, this is still a resistance level. We're not out of the woods yet, but if we see decent pushes to the upside on the Aussie market, that could actually bode well for the rest of the economy. Just because we're made up of mining and banking are the two biggest sectors in the Aussie market. So um, generally going into a banking crisis, you wouldn't expect the Aussie market to be going nuts. Total crypto market cap needs to find some support here. I think it could. No real read on that one. This stablecoins versus Bitcoin. Obviously, stablecoins have had a decent uptick. So there may be a little bit more left in this yet. Be interesting to see if we get all the way up to this level here, recover this vector. But we are leaving vectors behind. The same thing on Bitcoin. So I'm still leaning towards this is a correction, retrace, whatever you want to call it. I do think there will be more upside relatively soon. So longs on ETH are coming back in a little bit. Shorts are increasing though, which you expect. Bitcoin longs are getting a little uptick as well. Again, it was interesting. They actually dropped a little, but the fact that we're going sideways after an uptick, you tend to it tends to be a reasonably good sign. We haven't had like one of these flushes like we had in these periods, so it's one to watch out for. Again, if we do pull back a little bit further in Bitcoin, we may actually get that little bit of a flush just to get some of the leverage out of these. But in general, there are still buyers coming into the market here, but there are some shorters in the market as well, and that's something I look at not that often, but when you tend to see decent spikes, that actually tends to mark the bottom as well. So just something to keep in mind. Like there's a lot of times where we've had spikes in this where Bitcoin's sort of been bottoming. It's just the shorters come in late, typically. ETH BTC. Yeah. BTC dominance. I would expect this to continue to the upside, to be honest. So, and then ETH itself, be good if ETH could find some support around here. It's recovered a lot more of this wick here now. Realistically, that 200 EMA there is going to be the next point of support. So it may sweep this wick low, which would again correspond to another couple of days down before we find that bottom. And then it's just a matter of whether that is a macro bottom or whether it's just a dead cat bounce, something we're going to have to watch out for pretty closely. Okay, so CME, CME, it's finding some support off that 50 EMA still. Now CME is not, it was open. If CME turns around here with BBWP increasing and the fact that momentums would be forming a bullish divergence, that would be a really good sign. What we don't want to see is this continuing to the downside with BBWP increasing. That would probably lead us back a reasonable way. CME should find some support around the 87K mark. So that's something to keep in mind as well. That may be the next little bounce point if we are going to continue lower. But in general, I think this is still like the head and shoulders pattern. I don't think will necessarily play out at this stage. It just depends how much Bitcoin the US government's going to drop on us and how quickly. Biden seems to want to fuck everyone whoever wronged him. So 91,700, yeah. Oop. So back to Bitcoin itself now. This 100 EMA is kind of, given that this is a breakthrough, that 50 EMA, we're still within this cloud. So Trader's Reality, he has a cloud around the 50 EMA, it's sort of an uncertain zone. Whereas if you're breaking out of that with a vector or something like that, it's it's a much more certain move. So we're still kind of in that zone. It was last week's low as well. We are finding a bit of support here. The fact that we're in no man's land on the pivots is a little concerning. There is a downward channel that we're kind of forming as well at the moment. So again, we may sweep this area, sweep this low here, freak everyone out, and then reverse. Still kind of what I'm leaning towards. It's just this move, the grind down. Typically, if it was gonna really continue and flush harder, you would normally see a bit of a bounce. Like bear flags are typically show an increase before you get another drop. This is a little different. Hard to long when you're seeing a grind down like this, and I haven't got any proper long signals on this particular indicator here, which has a pretty good hit rate. Until I see something from this, I'm probably just going to wait. But this is your channel at the moment. I think this is the one to watch. If we break to the upside, reconfirm it, then I would expect actually a pretty reasonable bounce on Bitcoin. The 100K level is still going to be probably a decent resistance on the shorter time frames, but to be honest with you, if we don't break down completely, if the US is Roberts C, BTC will hit 94K today. Oh, that's, yeah, probably. That wouldn't surprise me at all. That's not that far away. But yeah, like it looks like there's a little nibble going on at the bottom here. We're not on huge volumes either on this dip. Interesting little spike here. Kind of finished in no man's land, to be honest. Like, yeah, you could actually draw this channel a little bit tighter too. There's more hits on it in both directions. So that's something to keep in mind, but you just got to be wary of fake outs. Now we've contracted in the linear regression as well. So I think we're getting a breakout in either direction, and this linear regression is starting to expand the standard deviations, then that's probably going to prove the move. Just at the moment, there's nothing really that seems to be driving this. It's kind of a just wait for Bitcoin to find its direction. BTC. Let's go to Binance, because that indicator actually had a. Oh no, worse on Binance. Only just. Anyway, quick look at Sol. Sol's doing the same kind of thing. It's at a pretty critical level as well. Bit of support in here. And it could sweep a little bit lower, pick up some of these levels under here, but then kind of expect it to bounce off that. XRP. XRP's held up pretty well, actually. It's one of the ones that hasn't dropped as much. A lot of these have had a pretty decent sell-off there. AI seems to be the play. Like, just watching the different markets during the recent pumps and dumps and things, AI is one that seems to be getting a lot of the airtime, a lot of the attention. So, and it kind of makes sense. One thing you got to consider here is, like, having gaming coins, having $1 billion market caps and things like that. I think we're changing in the way the markets in general are looking at risk, and the amount of actual liquidity that is in the markets. Proportionally, we're not going to have as much dumb money, I don't think. So some things will get ridiculous valuations still, but I'm just not sure how big this, like, typically before the end of a market cycle, a big market cycle, you do get a big blow off top. Now, some would argue that we've already had that. I'm not 100% certain on that yet. But yeah, just, I think people are going to be looking at actual valuations and start to look at, okay, what is the actual potential revenue out of this thing? What is the potential user base? And start to price things a little bit more rationally. But AI definitely doesn't necessarily fit that mold yet, because there is a lot of hype and a lot of speculation. And that's kind of what you're looking for in crypto. Coinbase getting a bit of interest down the bottom here. We haven't dropped off as much either. Like, it's not really doing the same thing as Bitcoin itself. So that's something to to keep in mind. I'd like to see a little bit more interest, but this is a reasonable sign still. Nothing really coming in on the 2x long fund though as well. So that's, I guess, not the greatest sign. There was a pretty decent one at that level down there. Now, it doesn't look like they've really taken profits unless they took it on the way up. So kind of nothing read there, but I bet is getting a fair bit of interest at these levels. Now, whoever's putting these orders in at the start of the session is certainly governing the direction of the session at the moment, but the guys seem to be buying at the moment on the way down. There's people buying the dips at the end of the session. So if we go to flows, only slightly negative over the last couple of days. So there's still quite a bit of money coming into ETFs. Let's look at, just look at the 30-day, go straight to that. It's overweight to the upside now. Again, a sweep down into these areas, 89s, 88s even. I'd actually be surprised, looking at this, I'd be surprised if it gets much lower than 89. But this doesn't necessarily pick up all the liquidity that's been sitting there for more than 30 days either, which there might be some. Whoa, a lot of orders coming into the books, down to about that 86K mark, 85, 86K. Not a lot of short orders comparatively. Getting a lot of bottoming signals here, but that kind of concerns me. Just the amount of BTC that's been ordered down at those levels. I don't think it would get to 77. But yeah, looking at this, is 89 even going to hold you up? Don't know. It'd only be if it did, it would just be because the market is thinking it's going further down and it just doesn't want to do what the market is thinking. Still a decent amount of open interest as well. Cumulative volume delta is still tracking to the downside. Flattened off a little bit on spot down here, but yeah, at this stage, CVD isn't showing signs of recovery. You want to see this thing starting to edge up and break that downtrend as price is starting to chop sideways and up. We're just not seeing that at the moment. But there is definitely a lot of bids when Bitcoin is dropping all the way through this. So this shows a slightly different open interest as well. Open interest still coming down, but yeah, it is what it is. As you can see, there's a lot of shorts in the market at the moment. Millions of dollars worth of shorts. Just zoom out a little. Looking at it. Looks like it's taken some of this liquidity block here already, but it'll probably take the rest of that, which will probably lead to a bit of a cascade as well. Would not be surprised if that happens. Similar to what we sort of saw over here when it broke through that level. Go to 3 months, see what's sitting there. I mean, this looks scary AF, but you don't expect Bitcoin to just run straight into these levels, particularly not when we're still technically in a bull market on the weekly trend. But yeah, that level there, 85.7, that is a potential area for it to be attracted to and a potential area for a reversal. Just when Bitcoin sort of pulls back and sets in sort of some chop after a run up, it is reasonably common for it to come back into these levels. So before heading up again. So yeah, key levels to look out for. We may find some support around the 90k, 89 sort of level, potentially in the next day or two, and then bounce. But if we get a bit more of a flash, if the US drops a heap of Bitcoin on us, if it hasn't already, then that 85, 86 is another key level. All right, what else? So XLE is still increasing as well, and that's, there hasn't been anyone taking profit yet. That's, I think, actually a decent sign that we might be turning around relatively soon. A lot of interest coming in. Sorry, that's energy. So that's the oil stocks and all that sort of thing. Metals and mining is getting a reasonable volume through it at the lows here as well. So I think that's not a bad thing. I think upside on these would suggest that people are a bit more bullish on the economy. Not a lot of action on XLP, consumer staples, but after this, it needs to really break through this highly traded area. XLY, a little bit of interest here. Hopefully it's not another sell. Would kind of expect it to be a buy, because there was another buy here at a very similar level. But again, it needs to probably break through these high volume levels for it to really be bullish. So yeah, that's about all I have for today, I think. Just trying to think if there's anything else. Reasonable move here at the moment. Increasing volume. See what happens when it gets to there. Again, those W pattern formations are going to be things to watch out for. So a little pullback off the 50 EMA into that level, and then a move to the upside could be the start of a turnaround. They're the kind of things you want to see. If you're seeing breaks at this level, you want to see it off that sort of a turnaround. So yeah, as I said, I don't know. There is a fair bit of liquidity down around this 90k mark, so could just be choppy for the next few days. All right, that's about it. I'll catch you later.